It's a pleasure to welcome everyone to today's session titled How Policymakers Think, Sharing Research for Policy Use. This is the 7th session of UNESCO's Functional Area 1 Learning Series of 2025, which is aimed at sharing critical reflections and local experiences for a culture of evidence-based policy and planning. This series is part of the work of the SDG 4 Education 2030 High-Level Steering Committee within the Global Education Cooperation Mechanism. Later in this webinar, we will learn more about this important work from Guan-Choi Chang, the Chief of Educational Policy Section at UNESCO headquarters. The session today is also the GP KIX EMAP Hub Webinar 25. The EMAP Hub is part of the Global Partnership for Education, Knowledge and Innovation Exchange Initiative, which is jointly implemented with the International Development Research Center in Canada. Since 2020, KIX is supporting the uptake of research evidence in GP partner countries. The EMAP Hub is hosted by NORAG, the Global Education Center, and works with over 35 countries in Europe, Middle East and North Africa, Asia and the Pacific. It is within the framework of GPE's education transformation agenda that the Hub acts as a knowledge broker, promoting the use of locally relevant research evidence in policy, planning, and education practice. Today's webinar departs from the premise that there is much to learn from knowledge users and knowledge producers, both inside and outside the EMAP region. This webinar will explore these experiences in 2 panel discussions, each followed by question and answers from the audience. The first panel will be moderated by Gita Steiner-Kamsi, William H. Kilpatrick Professor of Comparative Education at Teachers College, Columbia University. Gita is also the KIX EMAP Hub lead researcher and the UNESCO Chair of Comparative Education Policy at the Geneva Graduate Institute. In this first panel, we will hear from representatives from Cambodia, Indonesia, KIX Republic, and Norway on how and when policymakers use research evidence to inform their decisions. The second panel will be moderated by Shan-Wang Beck, Assistant Professor in International Relations Political Science Department at the Geneva Graduate Institute. Shan-Wang is also UNESCO co-chair in Comparative Education Policy and Academic Director of NORAG. In this second panel, we will hear from representatives from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Republic of Korea, and Vietnam on the mechanisms and strategies that knowledge producers have found effective in connecting with policymakers. Before handing over to Gita Steiner-Kamsi, a special thanks to the UNESCO team for their close collaboration with the Hub, and to the Hub team whose work made this webinar possible, namely Marina Droforte, Alison Vaz, and Yasmina Osama. Thank you, and Gita, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, Jose Luis, explaining the KIX initiative. It is my pleasure to welcome you also and to this event where we bring the 2 groups that usually are in separate rooms into one Zoom room. And I thought I would give you some, a framing presentation on the issue of knowledge production and knowledge usage in education. And I would like to ask to show the PowerPoint that I had. Alison, would you mind pulling it up? It's going to come anytime soon. So what we have since the 1980s, there's a pressure on policymakers to use research evidence. And that pressure has materialized in a lot of data. When we just look at the indicators, since the 80s, it's skyrocketed. We have so many global indicators right now. And we also have so many studies, both produced in ministries, but also in universities and think tanks that attempt to be policy relevant. So this situation, we sometimes call it, there's a surplus of evidence or a surplus of research. And of course, technology helped to produce that surplus. So I'm still waiting for the PowerPoint. I think it's going to come soon. And I can see it is there in a second. So when we scroll down, Hold on. More. Or is that a different PowerPoint, maybe?
Sorry, I think there is a change. Alison is taking over. It's
Okay.
the right slide deck.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, that's it. So when you go to, yes, slide number 2, you see that because there is the surplus of information in the technology age, but also in the age of evidence-based policy planning, we see more and more a group, what we call knowledge brokers, that attempt to improve the uptake of research, because now there's an imbalance between a lot of research, a lot of data, a lot of indicators, but the use is limited. And these knowledge brokers, they can be individuals, but they also can be institutions. And we think OECD, for instance, is a knowledge broker to some extent, but also KIX, GPE attempts to be, through their hubs and knowledge brokers, bringing together policymakers and knowledge producers. There's 2 great books. This is talking about our own book, of course, the 2024 that Chanung Beck and I had the pleasure of editing with many contributions, including from colleagues that are now in this chat room. But also Gil Eyal, who, broke ground with his 2019 book. It's called The Crisis of Expertise. So if we go down one more, I try to differentiate between the 2 kinds of issues and different challenges that knowledge users or policymakers have, as opposed to those that produce knowledge. So on the side of policymakers or knowledge users, I identify at least 4, but I'm sure there are more than these 4 questions that is on their mind when it comes to the use of knowledge for policy decisions, for decisions in government. One of the question is which advisory system to put in place, which institution, what kind of institution. And we know there are many different types of systems that are in place, and they vary not just by country in terms of policy styles, there are different policy styles, but even by sector. And we had a project in the Nordic region, which was a wonderful project. 5 countries, colleagues from 5 countries joined. It was called Polnet, University of Oslo. Kirsten Siversen was the PI, principal investigator. And we saw there even within the same regions, 5 different styles, 5 different policy advisory systems. And, you will hear later from Elin Munthe what they do in Norway, but even within a country, the sectors vary. And in Norway, for example, education is the one sector that makes most use of evidence. Of course, I have a theory there, and the theory is that because education is a public area where everyone has an opinion how education and school reform should look like, we in education are particularly under pressure to use evidence and research for policy decisions. But the second point is, at which stage in the policy process is advice sought? And again, policymakers and knowledge users have different opinions and different practices when they are looking for evidence and for studies, for data, etc. The third issue is, what is the role of global players? We have now a collaboration here in this Zoom room with UNESCO, but the question is, of course, also for OECD, GPE, World Bank, think tanks, Education Out Loud, many other think tanks, international think tanks and NGOs that also have a role, sometimes as knowledge brokers, but also as knowledge producers. Then the last question is, who are the audiences? Who do you want to convince by means of data and evidence? That's the 4th question. Is it within the ministry itself? Is it within the government? Is it the people? Is it the constituents? Is it the professional community? Is it teachers' union? So the audience, the target audience of research is also a big issue for knowledge users or for policymakers. Let's move on to the next one and just quickly talk about number 1 and 2. So number 1, as I said, there are different policy styles in place, and we know that from research. There are permanent versus ad hoc advisory panels. In the US, they have hearings. There is this classic study by Weingart. He talks about 6 different types of advisory panels, and it really varies by country. One big issue is always, should it be independent, affiliated, or contracted research? I know in the Kyrgyz Academy, where in Kyrgyzstan, where I worked for a while, you have a Kyrgyz Academy of Education, which is an affiliated institution, but other countries prefer not to have affiliated institutions, but pay researchers to produce policy-relevant research. And other countries, again, have permanent structures in place, and probably Korea is one of them, with institutions that are there just to produce knowledge for policy use and political use. And another question is, should it be indicator-based, data-based, or expert opinion-based? And again, it's a matter of style, and I look forward to the discussion, what the panelists have to say. Maybe the next slide, Alison. Again, I'm just opening up the spectrum of issues that are of concern for policymakers or decision makers. One of the classic books we have in policy studies is by Christopher Hood, and he differentiates between effectors and detectors. What does a government do to have an impact or an effect, and how does it know what to do? So sometimes data is used to get the pulse of public opinion, to see where is a need to do something. So this is the stage of trying to do almost like a needs assessment. But sometimes it's also used to generate pressure or to show that there's a need to do something, to justify policy action. So it is to generate public awareness. Very often, and this is where global actors are very strongly involved, they try to present themselves by disseminating good practices. This gives them also a legitimacy and gives them international authority, because these are cross-national issues that they have a niche in there. But also research is sometimes used to evaluate outcomes. Again, we will hear from panelists what their experiences is. At what stages do they usually use do they usually use data and studies and research? Let me move on to the next one. And this is now, again, remember, we are looking at the link between politics and science, or between knowledge producers and knowledge users. And let's now move on to the ones that produce knowledge, to the researchers, to the analysts, to the policy analysts. And again, I want to show you with this presentation that they have a different kind of mindset and different kind of issues or different kind of challenges. And I just listed 4 that we may want to address in the presentations. One is how to provide data-based quality advice. The second is how to ensure that the policy advice is really heard and not noticed and amplified. The third is how to increase the relevance of the study for policy decision. And KIX is particularly strong in this area, in the number 4. I'm sorry, I skipped 3. The number 4 is really KIX, because one of the beliefs of KIX is that policy research needs to be localized and include local researchers. Otherwise, it's not relevant for governments and decision makers. So this is what KIX is really doing. It encourages and amplifies the voice and expertise of local experts. And the last point in the right corner, how to appear credible and trustworthy. That's also an issue that we have as as a researcher. And as you know, we do that usually by showing what methods we use, what database we use. This is our way of proving that what we produce in terms of findings and interpretations is credible and trustworthy. Again, if I have time, let me just comment on the first 2 points, and that would be the next slide. How to provide database quality advice. Again, it seems simpler than it really is. In some countries, we have the challenge that there is little access to data. These days, there is a lot of data because IOs, or international organizations, put a lot of pressure on EMIS, Education Management Information System. So data these days is not such an issue at the central level. Sometimes it is an issue at the provincial level and at the school level, but access to data has become an issue. And because data has been discovered as a resource, as a valuable resource, sometimes researchers now have to pay for data, and this is a huge issue. So it's not only non-availability. I think the problem has shifted from non-availability to accessibility. But again, I'm looking forward to hear what the presenters have to say. The third one is, and how to, still, if you go back, the third point is the difficulty of translating numbers into policy narratives or advice. This is like a skill on itself, and it is an issue, and it is not unidimensional. There are always different interpretations. But I know that, for example, PISA produces all 3 years a lot of data, TIMSS does, and other international large-scale assessment. But what do governments do with it at the end of the day? How do they translate these scores and these findings into policy action? So that in and of itself is a challenge, and it will be interesting to talk about that. The second point, and just to wrap up, the second point is it has to do with how to communicate research better. There's a whole industry out there, a business out there on how to visualize data, how to write blog posts, how to write policy briefs, how to make research communicable. So this has come to the attention, I think, of researchers, that just publishing something in a peer-reviewed journal or in a journal is not enough. And there's a whole infrastructure now being built around the need to communicate research better. I think I should give the floor back. This is my input into showing the 2 sides, how they all have, both sides have different challenges. And I think I will now move myself to the next panel, if I understood correctly. And this is the first panel, group of panelists. We have, high caliber presenters, and very happy to introduce them briefly and then give the floor so they can address these 2 questions. So we're talking about the how and when policymakers or senior government officials use research to inform decision. And all the issues that I addressed are more or less addressed with the question. We asked the presenters to talk for about 5 minutes. They can pick any of those questions or anything that is important to them with regard to using research, data, and evidence. Let me introduce them briefly to you. Let me start from the right. Professor Ellen Munthe. She is based in Stavanger in Norway. She is actually not a user, but she is what we could call an intermediary or a knowledge broker. She has been a professor, dean, and what is really important for this panel is that she, between 2019 and 2024, she built a knowledge center for education at her university. And this was a center that was funded by the Ministry of Education and Research of Norway, specifically to conduct systematic reviews of research for the education sector and to make systematic reviews accessible. So we are looking forward to hear her experience. She also has an Asia link, which is very important for us because this is the region of our hub. She is the fourth Dr. Ruth Wong Professor at the National Institute of Education in Nanyang University in Singapore. So welcome, Elaine. Then let me move on with one of my favorite countries, Lira Samukbaeva. She's the Deputy Minister of Education and Science at the Ministry of Education and Science in the Kyrgyz Republic, based in Bishkek. And right now, I'm happy to report that she's in New York representing Kyrgyzstan at the UN General Assembly. Then Dr. Irshad Zamjani, he is head of the Center for Education Standards and Policy at the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education in Indonesia. You know, Indonesia is one of the largest countries, so it will be interesting to hear how they deal with knowledge users in such a large country that has a lot of capacity and is committed to data use. He also is a scholar. He wrote The Politics of Educational Decentralization in Indonesia, A Quest for Legitimacy. It was published with Palgrave in 2022. Then, last but not least, Dr. Lim Sothia. Cambodia has been closely collaborating with KIX EMAP, and we are very happy to have him here. Dr. Sothia is Director General of Policy and Planning and the Minister of Education, Youth and Sports in the Kingdom of Cambodia. So these policy and planning units is one form of advisory system. It is within the Ministry of Education. And we look very much forward to hearing from him, especially because he brings 20 years of experience in a central function for policy formulation and planning. And he coordinates between government institutions as well as development partners. So he is himself an intermediary between international arena and national arena. So having said that, if it's okay with you, we should maybe just follow the same order with Elaine. Maybe you can start off, and then I give the floor to Lira and to others. Welcome, everybody. Elaine, you need to unmute yourself. Yes, for 5 minutes.
Okay. I had to be allowed first. So yes, thank you very much for this invitation and also for the very interesting introduction that you gave to this session here. We're talking about links to Asia, so I can also mention that I've lived in Pakistan for 3 years and in Laos for 1 year, so I have some more ties to that region as well. But I'm invited here now to say a little bit about how, at least how I see the work that the Ministry of Education does, since I'm not in the ministry, but my experiences with it. And of course, we've worked with the Ministry of Education for many years. And I think that one of the things that you also mentioned that we have seen is that the use of research in policy has increased substantially in the past 20 years or so. And the research project that you mentioned, PolNet, which looked at how research is used in policy, is one of the research projects that has really highlighted the development of research use too in Norway in the education sector. So the ministry has its own analysis section, and the analysis section is responsible to make sure that there is a knowledge foundation for all of the strategies that the ministry is interested in implementing. So there's a special section of the ministry that has this responsibility. And they're also responsible for developing research strategies for the Ministry of Education. And when they develop these strategies, they often reach out to researchers, to research groups, to people throughout the country, and travel around and have meetings to sort of try to gather what's going on and what do other people think is really important for the country to emphasize in a research strategy too. So that's one way that they reach out to researchers and the work that's going on. Another thing that they do, of course, is that they have a directorate of education and training. And the directorate can have open calls for research within areas that are strategically important for the country. It could be on digitalization in schools. It could be on other areas that are being emphasized. And then these calls will be followed by applications from different research groups in the country to conduct research so that they can get the kind of local contextual research that they need as well. There's also a Directorate for Higher Education that is responsible for making sure that there's enough of a knowledge foundation when it comes to higher education research. And the Ministry of Education funds a lot of educational research. And that has increased substantially, and it's been used very strategically. So starting in 2005, for instance, there were strategic research programs targeting teacher education because there was a need for teacher educators to be more research oriented, to have more teacher educators with PhD degrees and so on. So it's been sort of used strategically, the research funding too, and the number of kroners that goes into research in the education sector has just grown through the years. And then, so in addition to having their own sector or their own section, plus the directorates, there are also national centers in strategic areas that have been established. And one of them is, as you mentioned, the Knowledge Center for Education. And that's the one that it was established, in fact, 13 years ago, something like that. But it moved to the University of Stavanger in 2019, and that's when I took over as director there. And that is a center where we are responsible for creating systematic reviews of research, acknowledging the fact that there is such an abundance of research on different topics. Some of the research holds high quality, some doesn't. So there's also that quality assessment aspect that's involved when you do systematic reviews that's important. And also the fact that we can both provide information for policymakers on, well, what do we know about a topic and what kind of advice could we give, but also to the Norwegian Research Council, or when it comes to research funding, because we can find out which areas there's little research on or where the research is weak. And also then to practitioners. We have the whole education sector as our sector, meaning teachers in early childhood education and all the way up to university level. So what we do is we also see, well, what kind of advice can we give to the different people involved when it comes to both policy, research, and practice. And then, of course, one more thing, and that is evaluations. So there's research on strategies that have been implemented. For instance, the Directorate of Education is now conducting an evaluation of the latest educational reform from 2020. And then there's an open call for research projects that want to look at how what's been going on in the schools, how have things been implementing, how is it developing, what changes do we need to make, and that program is coming to an end now. So all of the final reports are coming in, and I'm in that group too, the board for that evaluation. And one of the things that we see is important, and that's it for your next group in the next discussion, is that it's difficult sometimes for researchers doing research projects to conclude about, well, how can this be relevant for policy? So what does this mean for policy? So that's one of the things that we also see is important to work on. And the strategy that the Ministry of Education agreed on in 2024 for the next years is on really emphasizes research use. And that's one of the things that we see. So research use is a high priority, not just in policy, but also in early childhood, in the schools, by the practitioners. So how can we make this research relevant for other users than policymakers as well?
Great. So this is very interesting. The move also from promoting research production to research use, which I think we can see in many, many countries, including also in international organizations. Let me give the floor. Thank you so much, Elaine. Let me give the floor to Lira Samikbaeva. And I think you need to unmute your button. So we have afterwards opportunity to discuss again, Elaine and others, when we have the questions. Lira, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting. I think this is a really important topic for the Kyrgyzstan too. I agree with the Elaine that usually within the Ministries of Education, usually we have such a department, and in Kyrgyzstan we also have the Department for Monitoring and Strategic Analysis. But unfortunately, their mandate is not to provide deep policy research. Usually, their main task is to collect data from across the country and do those statistics. That's why collaboration with the international research organization, academia, and international partners as KIX, for example, is very important for us. However, I used to work for many years in a donor organization, and I myself supported this funding of such researches. And now I'm working on the side of the government, and I can see the problems which usually and challenges which those research organizations should face if they want that government if the government will really use the data which they produce. So one of those problems is, the first problem is a time frame, because in a government, we have to take decisions like in a days, in a hours, in a weeks, and usually we need data today and right now, and waiting for years for getting some data is impossible, unfortunately. And sometimes the ministers themselves, the deputy ministers, they change also often here in Central Asia, you know. And one minister makes an order to have this research, and the other comes and they say, no, I do not need the research at all. And this is also a very, very challenging point, I think. The other problem, as I see here also, is that trust to the organization who provide this research, because for example, if the research is financed or provided by an so-called interested party, then from our side, from the government side, this skepticism may arise. Still, for example, there are some organizations, and as usually as it happens, then if the in the TOR of the research, as a main task was considered finding the problems in this and that, at the result of the research, they will find, and they could easily support their own idea that yes, this is true and we should to do that. So this is really, we could see that there is a strong relationship between who provides and who finances the researchers at the end. And also, we've, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, our government usually sometimes they use the results of the IRI. This is a International Republican Institute. They provide this democracy and freedom researches, and our mass media always like to cite the findings of the researchers. And however, it could happen then if the results are positive for the government itself, they allow our mass media and everyone to build on top of the more political decisions and that and so on and so forth. But if the results are not favorable to what's happening in the country, the government tries to pay much less attention to this result. So this is, it's always how to say, individually individually used results, if I could say. If the government really likes it, how it sounds to the people, to the media, then they tend to use it in their work. So the trust and reliability, this is really an issue. And also, as Ms. Gita also said, the accessibility of the results is a huge problem, because having the results for like 200 pages of that research, it's a big headache. And usually we always say, please give us 2-page or 1-page document, and this is really enough. And with infographics, because to understand more clearly in a visual form, and this is very much important to the government, and I fully 100% agree with that too.
Thank you.
And the last thing is as I understood, since this is always like we need the data on these ad hoc data today and just right now, and writing this TORs, long TORs for the long time framed researches is, on my opinion, it's not that much useful for the government, but the researches which have this continuity, which are sustainable, as PISA, for example, which gives us more retrospective views on what's happening in our country, how this behavior is changing, and the people's mind and characters of our kids are changing. This is really important for us to see in a retrospective, and also how the world is changing and how Kyrgyzstan is in this worldwide picture, how Kyrgyzstan is really showed up itself in this world picture. I think these are main issues. And also, you've just mentioned about YEMIS. This is absolutely true. And we've and I myself in the ministry, I'm responsible for the digitization of our ministry. And for the last 2 years, we've created 18 different information systems, which are purely proposed. The main goal is to collect data, and in an online format, which says that those data are really up to date, not old, and so on. And also, we try to make that not to erase this duplication, because usually we got many data from different sources and sometimes they were really controversial to each other. So we've created those information systems, and now we are building this one system, YEMIS, which includes all the data from all the levels, starting from kindergarten, schools, universities, and other things, teachers, school kids, parents, and to get all this data. And at the end, we just in the process of the hiring of the developers who are working with the artificial intelligence tools to create these dashboards, the visual dashboards, which our head of our governments really like, which shows up the current situation on what's happening in the education sector for today, exactly for now. And in a smaller scale, we've started to use the AI, and this is really amazing what AI and the AIs use really speed up all the both the collecting information and having the analysis, and we've just finished with two big strategic documents where the basis was made by AI, and it was really great to see that in a such short time frame, with exact goals. When we by ourselves we said what we want to get, what answers we want to get at the end. So we were who the government was who designed the TOR specifically, and it really meets our needs at the end. And those documents were really highlighted in a very, very high level, on the level of the president and the prime minister. And I could see that there is a big, big future for the AI in the usage of this data.
Thanks so much, Lyra. Unfortunately, need to cut you off. But this whole topic of e-government, it's a global public administration reform. So I think it's very interesting for everyone to hear about your experience. And also AI, KIX EMAP will have a whole learning cycle on the use of AI in policy and planning. So maybe José Luis at the end will also say something about that. But all the points that Lyra made are so much to the point, and we are just lucky in Kyrgyzstan that we have someone who used to be a researcher with international experience, now works for government. And this is a very lucky coincidence. And knowing everything from the problem of those that collect data are not necessarily those that interpret the data, which is very big in GPE countries in particular, that we are used to collecting data for international organizations, but the ones that collect are not the ones writing it up or interpreting it. This is a big issue. But many, many other things, I don't want to go into detail, but trust, selective use of research, many things that you said, I think, are so much to the point and will maybe come up in the discussion. Let me pass the floor now to Dr. Irshad Zanjani from Indonesia. Please, Irshad. You need to unmute, but yes.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Professor Gita, for the opportunity to share my reflections from Indonesia. And I also learned from Elaine and Lyra, and I think some of our experience are the same and happening here in Indonesia. But yeah, because education systems are complex, and decisions are often made, like you said, under pressure from many different directions. That's why using research and data can be essential to navigate such complexity, I hope. And in our context, with more than 50 million students in Indonesia, you can imagine, spread across the diverse archipelago. Evidence help us not only to see the real problems of our system, but also to build a confidence and consensus for reform. And yeah, like earlier, we also in Indonesia have a specific organization within our ministry, which is dedicated to generate evidence for education policy. We have the Center for Education Standards and Policy, where I belong. And apart from developing national education standards, so we also have the role to conduct some research, but mostly on the evaluation aspect of the existing programs. And more specifically, some priority programs, such as if we have curriculum reform and perhaps teacher development or trainings and digital learning initiatives and so on and so forth. And sometimes our center also act as a knowledge broker because we have some what we call it development partners like World Bank, like UNESCO, like Professor Kita mentioned earlier, the international organizations and other think tanks, independent think tanks. Sometimes we communicate with them to gain their perspective as well. And I also want to share that we also have here in Indonesia the national assessment. So this is the annual assessment program administered by the Ministry of Education, which provide system-wide data on literacy, numeracy, and socio-emotional skills, as well as the quality of learning environment in our schools. So we collect this data annually to all schools across the country, and to make this data more actionable, we develop an education scorecard platform. So this is a digital platform that integrate the assessment results, the national assessment result that I mentioned earlier, with other education data. And we use this platform, this education scorecard platform, to advocate the evidence-based policy at schools and local government level. So we provide this platform for schools. We have the school education scorecard and the local government education scorecard. So we promote what we call it the evidence-based planning using this scorecard. And not only schools and not only local governments, other ministries like internal affairs department, because they are the one that look after the local governments in our political system, and also the National Development Planning Agency, because they are the one offers look after the national planning. They also adopt the scorecard as a reference for the national agency. They use it for for setting the target, etc. And for the internal affairs department, they use the scorecard to evaluate the performance of local government in the education sector. In this way, what began as a national assessment has become the backbone of an evidence-based policymaking ecosystem across multiple levels of government. So from schools to central government. Yeah, apart from the internal organization, we also engage universities. We also engage development partners, research institutes, independent think tanks, because we believe they bring fresh perspective, comparative knowledge, credibility to the policy and to evidence that base our policies. And sometimes we often create a policy task force that bring together our internal staff within the ministry, the academics and practitioners, including some of the independent think tanks, to join together to ensure that evidence is not only produced but also tested against against the realities in the field. So in practice, our ministry combines both internal advisors who provide institutional memory and alignment with government priority, which is the center of the Center for Education Standards, and also we also engage the external parties, external voices who broaden the horizon and deepen the evidence base. And yeah, I also want to be candid, that as mentioned earlier, that policymakers are not free from constraints. Yeah, we work under pressure of the political cycle. Yeah, a minister only serve in the office for like at most 5 years, and maybe less. Yeah, so we have to deal with also budget negotiations and also competing interests. This means that even high quality evidence might not always be used to its fullest potential. Sometimes reforms are adjusted or even postponed, right? And not because the evidence is unclear, because we are dealing with irreputable scholars, institutions, yeah, not because the evidence, but because the timing is sometimes politically difficult. So the consequence is that the research-based policy can become selective. Policymakers may use the part of the evidence that fit the agenda and leaving aside others. Sometimes I think in all countries do that. And from the knowledge producer side, sometimes you do the long-term studies, which often do not align with the short-term demands of the political cycle, and as a result, there is always a tension between the ideal of evidence-informed reform and the realities of the governance. I think that's all from me.
Yes,
for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samjani. It was interesting to see how Indonesia tries to also go to the school and province level, how you do that with that education scorecard and linking assessment with policy and planning. And this is the trend in general, to move away from input regulation to outcomes regulation. And I think this will be a very interesting experience for others. Let me move on. We are under time pressure, and I'm looking very much forward to giving the floor to Dr. Sotia. Please, Lim.
Can you hear me? So thank you very much for inviting me to this important seminar, webinar. And thank you, Carita, Professor Gita, for allowing me to share our country experiences. I think other speaker mentioned earlier that research is demand is increasing nowadays, especially among policy maker. They would like to know clearly what is the evidence of anything for the decision making. So I just would like to highlight some background where we start our reform, education reforms in 2013. And that time, our education, we focus very much on planning area than the policy. And we get to know that policy need to be developed by on evidence, by on the research. That's why from there, 2013, there were establishment of kind of think tank which involve from different perspective, different expert, university and other organization and ministry leader and technical expert is something like that. And then in 2015, there were established of Department of Policy under Directorate of Policy and Planning, where I am belong to, and the Department of Policy conduct a lot of policy-related research, which presented to the policy maker to use it, to use it, and there is two kind of research. I may say so. In Cambodia, there is a kind of policy-related research which carried out by the Department of Policy, and the quality assessment, learning assessment, which carried out by other technical department, Department of Inspectorate. Yeah. Inspectorate. So last time we developed kind of a 5-year education strategic plan, which more on planning. There is a limited input from the research finding. So it's more like planning rather than research. And then after the research carried out by the Department of Policy, a lot of input fitted into the ESP, the Education Strategy Plan. And the question is, research had to be qualified and relevant to the need of the education reform. Yeah. So how to select the topic for to do the research. So we have to discuss, and also we need to consult with the policy level, policy maker level, what should be the topic to be carried out, and also important to use it like 5-year period. We would like to use that research finding for the planning development. And also sometimes we would like to change any regulation or directive or whatever. So we have to come with the research finding. We have to discuss with the stakeholder, with the relevant the beneficiary, with the line ministry, with the local development partner. And when we when we analyze the data, we have to consult one round and second round with relevant technical department, so that they are aware on that, and then they can provide us more critical input into that finding. And with the local people, with the line ministry, with the development partner, and sometimes with the teacher trainer, and also university academy especially. So right now we very much strengthening the capacity of our researcher, more expertise on the research. So to make sure that research is more relevant and qualified and can be useful for the decision making. Yeah, decision making. And when we present it to the senior leader and minister, they sometimes they question to look into in-depth analysis. Why is it? How is it? And had to go to the field, to the field to have group discussion or do some observation is something like that, you know. And in addition to the analysis of the data which provided by the EMIF, Education Management Information System, and also we use a kind of checking with the data which provided by the National Institute of Statistics as well, to make sure that the data is accurate. And this is just on the quantitative, but does not tell us much on quantitative. That's why we have to go to the field, proper listen to the implementation level, especially listen to the listen to the voice of the beneficiaries. Yeah, and since after COVID, there are a lot of regulation has been changed accordingly, and we do a lot of survey and study from the ground, so that we can change the regulation. We can be useful for right now. Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sotia. I mean,
Yeah.
this is, I think, maybe lucky coincidence, but all panelists complement each other beautifully, from focusing on the local level and from school level and assessment now to focusing on planning, research for planning. I know, for instance, in planning units, they calculate teacher supply issues, school mapping issues. This is also research. It's very much applied research, needed data that is needed. And of course, as Dr. Sotia says, the issue, the quality of the data is, really important right there. So I know it's my fault. I was listening to you all, and I thought it was interesting. I should have cut you off more. The question is, do we have time for one question at least? Marina, we have?
We do, yes.
So why don't you just pick one question? I saw there's so many questions that came in the chat. I just started to write the first few questions, and I thought all of them were actually interesting. Sergio Godi from Chile, or Wilson Urenki, but you just pick one. I lost the oversight at some point. Just
No
pick one.
problem, Gita. Let me maybe just make a quick combination of some of the
Yes, that would
questions.
be great.
Yes, so there were several participants in the chat asking a bit about what are the sources of research. So first is whether it's research by local institutions that are used the most, by international organizations, whether it is research that is coming from specific departments of the ministry. And also related to that, how is it that you assess the quality of that evidence from these different sources?
Okay. That's a good question. Someone wants to jump in? probably different in every country, I would think. Ministry. Ellen, I feel like you want to say something. I can see. Yes. Oh, could someone unmute Elaine?
Now I think I'm unmuted. Yeah. Okay. Yes. A couple of things there, because there was also that question about time, and that politicians would like to have answers quickly to the questions that they're grappling with. And then there's a question of, okay, but where can you find that knowledge that you need to answer those questions quickly? And of course, what we do is that we go to the databases of literature and where all of the research is. But the problem there too is that costs. Access to those databases costs money too, and not everyone can access those databases equally as well in this world. So there's more open access now, and that's a good thing. So we can just hope that all of the research eventually will be open access. But trying to find out, well, what do we know already on a topic doesn't have to take that much time. So that's one way to gain access to it. But when it comes to assessing the quality, that also depends on the questions, because it depends on what it is you need, what kind of data you need. And if you read a research article and you can trust the data, and you can trust the results because they've been explicitly carried out, they have the kind of design that you need in order to answer your question, then you can assess the quality as relatively high. But it is important to check that, all depending on what your question is really and what kind of data you need. So I think that's an important thing. Where do we get the research from?
Any other? Thanks so much, Elaine. Someone else wants to chime in here? Dr. Zamjani, I see you move a little bit, or Lira or Dr. Sotiri. Like, where do you get, what is the relation between local and international research? What kind of research is used? Someone even talked about the RCTs, randomized control trials. Is that an issue in your countries? Do you do that? Do you fund RCTs? Or is it more evaluation research, formative evaluations?
Yeah.
Samjani.
Yeah, I think, maybe I jump in. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think we, in our case, we, at least in our center, we engage a lot with many organizations, independent, local or national, international organizations. And yeah, some, you mentioned about RCT. Yeah, some organizations are very, idealistic with the methodology that they choose. Yeah, specifically this RCT, methods. And we know that they want to make their the data is robust, the methodology is solid, but sometimes it takes time. And as I mentioned earlier, because we have limited, time to execute the policy and to gain insight from the evidence, so we can fix or we can improve the policy, the quality of the policy. So sometimes the timeline of the research and the policy cycle doesn't match. So yeah, we need, sometimes yes, you need to have the quality research at some point, but you also need to be aware that policymakers are limited by by other variables, like budget, politics, and so forth and so on. Yeah, this kind of negotiation are happening all the times, and some knowledge producer. Some research institute can accept this reality and adjust their methodology, and sometimes they do not accept that kind of situation. So yeah, this
Thanks so much.
dynamic is very interesting sometimes, and my point is that you need to understand each other, the policymakers and on one side, and the knowledge producer on the other.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have to move on. I wish I could have also given the floor to Lira and Dr. Lim, but we have to move on. The issue of time, the right timing, and the time budget of government, which is different than the in-depth time that researchers need to produce good research. There's this time conflict, I would say. But let me thank you, all of you. This was very interesting and very complimentary. And I would like to give the floor now to Chanung to introduce the second panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
And maybe just a brief suggestion as we are starting the second roundtable. For the speakers of the first roundtable, if there are particular questions in the chat that would like to respond, please do so in the chat. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to serve as the moderator for the second panel of this wonderful session. As Gita has noted, there are very interesting questions that are being shared in the chat box, and I'm pretty sure in the second panel, the panelists will be able to address some of those questions as well. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us 4 panelists who will share their reflections on evidence use in the policy process from a evidence/knowledge producer's perspective. So in the first panel, as Gita has noted, the discussions were based on the user's perspective, and the second panel focuses on the perspective of the producer's perspective. So I am going to introduce the panelists from the order that I see on the screen in the slides. The first panelist is Sajid Hamid. He is a public policy analyst and the founding CEO of the Institute of Informatics and Development in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Since 2013, he has led IID's mission to foster an informed, inclusive, and democratic society through research, advocacy, and public engagement. He previously served as a research fellow at the University of Melbourne, Australia. Saeed, I apologize, sorry. Saeed also coordinates the Bangladesh CSO Alliance Secretariat and holds several international and national advisory roles. So his background really fits the purpose of the second panel as the knowledge producer. The second panel list we have is Dr. Sajid Ali. He's Amir Sultan Chino Endowed Professor and Director of Research at the Aga Khan University's Institute for Educational Development, Pakistan. He's the General Secretary of Pakistan Association for Research in Education. He's the Pakistan Country Coordinator for Global Partnership for Education, Knowledge and Innovation Exchange at GP-KIX. The third panelist we have is Dr. Seungjae Park. He's a Senior Research Fellow and Director General at the Korean Educational Development Institute. He served as a Senior Advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education of Republic of Korea. And finally, we have Lee Tai Lee. She is Head of Institutions, Infrastructure, Economics, and Business at the Mekong Development Research Institute in Hanoi, and a lecturer at the University of Languages and International Studies, Vietnam National University, Hanoi. She holds a PhD in International Relations from the University of Nottingham and has 5 years of experience leading education research and evaluations in Vietnam and Asia. So as you can tell by the backgrounds and experiences of all the panelists, they really will be able to share their insights and reflections on regarding the production of knowledge and evidence in the public policy process. So for this panel, I have two broad questions that I would like to ask the panelists to reflect on. The first question addresses the relationships you build in your work, and the second one more focuses on the content you produce. So let me read the questions out loud. What mechanisms or strategies have you/your organization/your team found effective in building sustained relationships with policymakers so that your research does not simply sit on a shelf, but actually informs policy decisions? So that's the first question. The second question is, how do knowledge producers, such as yourself, guard against becoming policy contractors who may tailor evidence to fit political priorities rather than independent actors shaping the policy agenda with critical and sometimes uncomfortable findings? And this question is closely related to some of the discussions that we had in the first panel regarding the credibility of research and neutrality of research and so on. So each of you has about 5 minutes. I will be strict with the time management. I will raise my physical hand, not the online hand, but physical hand here when you have a minute left, so you can wrap up your thoughts. We will follow the order that we have on the screen and follow the order that I just introduced. So we will start with Saeed Hamed, please.
Thank you so much, Chanung, for the very provocative questions. And greetings to colleagues from who are joining from around the world. At IID, we have learned a simple truth. Evidence turns into action only when there is ownership, relevance, and trust. So we hold this in what we call that we have a 3I mission, that you inquire the evidence, you inform the evidence, and you involve people and policymakers. First, at the inquiry level, we co-produce evidence with the community. So our research team, they work tirelessly with the locally rooted partner. And we also have a nationwide volunteer network, youth volunteer network, we call Youth for Policy. So this matters for two reasons. One, for instance, as I speak, our team is assessing more than 8,000 students on foundational learning for the SDG 4.1.1. And though it's citizen-led, the sample frame comes from the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics to ensure authenticity. So this gives our data the legitimacy to the policymaker, but because it's also citizen-led, we are partnering with our local partners, it creates a ready constituency of citizen and youth who later will demand follow-through. So I think that's one important thing we do. The second, while informing, of course, we never drop a report. We translate findings into more visual briefs. Our reports usually look very visual and the storytelling. But if I am to answer your question, I would say it's the third approach that is interesting. Third, when you involve, this is where our relationships actually deepen. At the community level, we convene town hall and courtyard meetings. So our citizen, official, elected leaders, and service providers, they sit with the evidence, debate their priorities, agree on realistic actions. So it's like we create a citizen scorecard, and they will debate that, okay, so what needs to be done, in the next 6 months. And so our local partners can follow up with them. And also because they just realized that, these evidence were collected only a few months back. They were there, so they feel the ownership of that as well. And also, people recognize them, as their own findings. But at the national level, we had to rethink the typical seminar and conference style, because it's hard to persuade a busy policymaker in a crowded day. So we created 2 safe, high trust formats. One is we call the Policy Conclave. It's a 5-day residential program outside the capital. So senior bureaucrats and policymakers, lawmakers, they step away from the interruptions and can deep dive into options with the peer and experts. So it's and you are there with 24-hour with them during that time. So it's an immersive learning experience not just a lecture series. And being together, day and night creates a space for both formal and informal debate. And we have seen that the alumni, those, the participants of this policy conclave, they later on become actually active champion in CSO-led advocacy, in partnering with them. We also do what we call the policy breakfast. That's a follow-up mechanism. It's a 2-hour invitation-only session under the Chatham House rule. They bring together stakeholders with opposing views, but then again, it also builds confidence to have a very critical discussion there. So these forums do two things. They turn evidence into shared problem solving, and they create champions inside government who carry ideas forward. But there is also a common risk. I think that is the second question you had, is while you're doing so, how we avoid becoming the policy contractors. And we guard against, with two, specific non-negotiable approach. One is that financial independence. Our core research and advocacy are never funded by the government. And so we can actually, be very honest with them. And we also maintain a balanced advocacy posture to avoid getting trapped in only praise or only protest. To stay balanced, so we what you call, we have a 2x2 approach. So, for instance, the tone that you use, it can be supportive or critical, and the setting can be both public or non-public. So that's give you like four, you can be publicly critical or publicly supportive. It can be non-publicly critical or non-public supportive, and each has its own limitations. So public space broaden the reach, but it can limit the candor. Non-public space allow frank discussion, but it has less visibility. Supportive tone build trust, but it can drift into inaction. Critical tone create urgency, but then it can trigger defensiveness. So our experience is that lasting change comes when you work across all 4 quadrants and choosing the right mix depending on the issues at hand. And this is this is how we sequence our work. We co-produce the evidence, then we translate it in decision moments, and then we convince safe space to decide, and keep a very visible community level feedback loop. I think that is over time that also created a build trust. For instance, if you know that recently Bangladesh went through a massive political change. The student uprise that actually changed the whole government. But because we have always maintained a neutral position where our only focus was that we bring the evidence to the policymaker at hand. So last year, before the uprising and after, we were able to, convene with the government the same way. Earlier it was that government, then it's this government, and we'll never be questioned that, whether are you pro-government or anti-government, because it's like our job is to take the evidence, whoever is in power, tell them that, this is what the people want, this is what the problem is, that this is what we should do. And we always follow that quadrant, that we are sometimes critical, we are sometimes supportive, depending on the issue. So I think that kept us safe from becoming the policy contractors. I hope I answered your question. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. I mean, thank you so much for sharing your experience and thoughts. Especially, I found the term you used, turning evidence into shared policy, shared problem-solving process, particularly relevant and interesting. So now let me give the floor to Sajid, who can continue discussing these 2 important questions. Sajid.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me fine? All right. Okay, so when I reflect on the question that you put me, I have 4 or 5 things to say. First thing that I would like to say is we think of policy at a big one term. But I think we have to unpack the various levels of policy where we have to influence. And I think and I was reflecting probably in the context of Pakistan, I can think of at least three levels. One is a federal level, and you can call it macro. Then there is a provincial level, and then there's a departmental level. Give you three examples. So, for example, one national education policy is a federal policy. Then there is provincial teaching license policy. Then departmental things, for example, decisions about teachers training or textbooks. Now, if you segregate levels, you have different strategies to influence them. And I think the biggest one that I think has worked in our case is as Saeed also said, cultivating long-term relationships. But I think what for example, in my experience, we have tried to go bottom up rather than top down. So instead of approaching federal level, we generally work with what let's say call street level bureaucrats, because they are often unheard. So, for example, the director of training institute or the director of a textbook board, the director of teacher education authority, generally they are very down in the educational hierarchy. They have to do a lot of work, but they are often not the decision makers. So I think if I reflect over past 20 years, I've been working with all these people, and eventually they come at a decision-making level. So I think if you work with them long term, you build relationship, you build trust, and all the things that Leah was saying earlier. Trust is probably the single most important thing, the neutrality, who you are, and you have to have a long-term relationship. So I think those are some of the things that that's one thing that I have learned from my experience. Also the organization, the type of organization that you are. I think academia has probably the biggest advantage in our context, because they are generally considered neutral, academic. They also have the advantage of a student body that graduate from them. So, for example, we graduate lots of education people who eventually also find their spaces within the government ministries. And after 20 years, I see many of them at key positions within the government. So academia has double advantage. We have neutrality. We also have authenticity. We also have a students' body, which also brings trust to that level. So organizational repute, long-term relationship. Third that I would like to point out is being able to sense the pulse of the government. As Leah was saying, government has very short span. So by engaging with the government long term, you are able to sense the pulse. So I give you the example of teaching license policy. And linking it with is cultivating relationship and working with them in soft spaces. What is the soft space that I would like to point out? Soft space is when I invite these policymakers to my class for a webinar, for a seminar. I take my class to the Ministry of Education, asking them to share their evidence. We do small policy related research in the classroom, taking permission from them. And then I make a point to share those evidences and research back to the Ministry of Education. So that built quite a good relationship with them. And so that also helps us build the pulse, that also make us visible, that also bring us invitations to participate in different seminars or webinars. And we try and make use of it. And so I think it's about being heard, being able to work with them, and all those things. And if, for example, other questions comes in, I have other things to share. In the last minute that I have, I can only talk about the policy contractor thing that you mentioned. I think unlike civil societies, donor agencies, consultant research, academia generally is a safe space. So I work in a university, and I think we take evidence as on its face value. We bring robustness, criticality, and I think one thing that I found very useful is being constructive. Work with them. understand the issues and the challenges with them rather than criticizing them. So some of the researchers who are very good are also very critical and they are less heard. I think it's better to achieve something than dropping everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sajid. I think what both the panelists, the Saeed and Sajid, highlighted is the relationship that you build with the policymakers, right? And then Sajid also highlighted it's important to think about different levels of policy, which I find particularly interesting. One thing that you mentioned regarding relationship is the long-term relationship, right? How it is important to build long-term relationship. And here, I think the book that was recently published by Gita on time in education policy transfer could be relevant to understand the temporal dimensions of education policy. So Alison, if you can actually share the link in the chat box, that would be wonderful. Now I'd like to give the floor to Sinjae, Dr. Park, to reflect on these two questions that we on the table. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Seung-jae Park from South Korea. I belong to the government education research institute, Korean Educational Development Institute, the largest educational research institute in Korea. First of all, I should introduce the Korean educational system, the governance. We have the Ministry of Education with 17 Metropolitan Office of Education. These 17 Office of Education are local autonomy entities. So our clients, all of them, the central government and the metropolitan, 17 Metropolitan Office of Education. So in Korea, there are 6 education research institutes. The general education policy, we serve general education policy, Korean Educational Development Institute, KED. The other is curriculum and education sector and information technology, IT sector, and lifelong learning and vocational education and training, VET, and TV channels. We have several TV channels for education. So these 6 area research institute, there are 6 research institute, all broadcasting service in Korea. In these research entities, nearly about 500 PhD, nearly 500 doctors serve national educational policies in there. I am one of them. So the government funded research institute, the member of our research institute, government research institute, are very closely related with the government officers, Ministry of Education. So I was the public officer of Ministry of Education. So the management level of these research institute are very closely with the central government and the local metropolitan government. So we communicate each other so closely. So there is no problem maybe in your country also. So we are not private, we are public sectors. So our task or our missions are two kinds of research, pure research and policy-based research. The two research, the characteristics of these two research are somewhat different. I'll talk it later. And the other is pilot study and survey, large-scale survey and project management. So in the stage of the policy implementation, from decision making and policy implementation and policy evaluation. All of these stages, we are involved each other's. The 6 government research institutes. So before the policy implementation, we surveyed. We service the survey, large-scale survey, pilot study, or the pure research, or policy-oriented research. So we support government, and in process, we usually make ad hoc committees to reviews, instant reviews, the past reviews. So, and the poll or survey for supporting the policy implementation. And after stages, we should evaluate and assessment the policy evaluation or policy assessment. And also we should print out the white books for the new policies, education policies. So this stage, we are involved each other with the government, public officials. And the second, in Korea, there are 12,000 primary and secondary schools, 12,000. And student numbers are 5 million for elementary and secondary students. And the yearly budget are 90 billion US dollars. So we use every year 90 billion US dollars for primary and secondary education. So we should evaluate, we should support policy implementation for efficiency. Lastly, knowledge produce and networking. Yes, our chip level management closely related with public servants or the government officers. So we have some regular meeting for some policy and researches with the Ministry of Education. So this is the networking structure in Korea. Just like we are somewhat we have some tendency of centralized. However, right now we are decentralized. We have some tradition of centralized. So we mixed centralized scheme with decentralized presence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I myself used to work at KIX in my many years ago, and it's nice to hear about the KIX's involvement in the national education policy process. You had mentioned the 2 types of research that are conducted at KIX. The first one is the pure research project, and the second one is the more policy targeted and policy relevant projects. And I had a chance to be part of both types of projects, and it was quite fascinating how the process for each research project works out or pans out differently. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, Dr. Park. And now let's move on to Lee. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing me this opportunity to share our experience in doing research in education with all the panelists and also the participants here. I'm Lee Lê, and I'm based at the Mekong Development Research Institute in Vietnam, and also a lecturer at the Vietnam National University of Hanoi. So Mekong Development Research Institute was founded in 2013, and with around 12 years of experience, and we have completed around 130 projects. And I must say that around 95% of them are funded and contracted with international donors and international research institutes and universities around the world. So we do not have much fund that runs from the government. And from my own experience, and I have been conducting and coordinated several I think around 5 or 6 research projects in education. Then some of them are the research to improve education system, which lasts over 6 years and conducted across Vietnam. And another one is a RCT project that provides a socio-emotional learning course to students in different formats to evaluate the effects of that intervention on students' cognitive and non-cognitive performance. And also I am the leader of the GB KIX project to do research on education resilience across 14 countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And yes, to answer the first questions on the strategies that we have employed to sustain relationships with the policymakers. So again, I want to emphasize and highlight the importance of co-production. But in Vietnam, the context is a bit different from the other two panelists. It is just because in Vietnam, we are considered as an independent research institute. And to do any large-scale project across Vietnam, then we must follow the government regulations, and we have to make our research known and approved by the relevant authorities. So that is why normally we have to send the official correspondence to maybe the Ministry of Education and Training or the provincial authorities to one side, then we can gain our project's legitimacy, but on the other side, then we bring our research, our project to the table and to be aware of by the policymakers. And that is one of the advantages that we can make use of when we can, later invite them to the training sections, for example, or the co-designing of the research, of the survey tools, or also inviting them to the consultation workshops where we bring our interim research findings to them and to see and to hear their opinions on the findings and to see any kind of mismatch between the realities and our research findings or not. So it is a compulsory process in Vietnam, but at the same time, it brings us the advantage when we have our legitimacy, and also we can engage them later during the research projects. And that is one. And the second way that we have employed, it is the kind of iterative and regular and diverse engagement formats with the policymakers. So at MDRI, then we normally do not wait. It is just because we have, a kind of advantage when we design the research activities by ourselves, that we design it from the beginning, and then we implement the activities. So we, at the beginning, then we had an opportunities to think of how to bring our research findings to the table to be known by policymakers and to engage with them. And normally workshops and webinars and kind of presentation workshops and policy briefs are already included in our research proposal. So that is one advantages of us. And yes, and we do normally do. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, so we try to interact with policymakers at different stages of our research instead of waiting until the end of it. And also we have some recent discussions with the National Assembly in Vietnam. So there we had a chance to bring our research findings to them to advocate for the importance of AI, for example. And then lastly, I want to highlight one point that maybe the other three panelists have mentioned. It is about aligning our research with the national and the global development agendas. So that is one of the secured way for us to avoid any risk of, wasting our findings when we, normally we do research in at least 1 or 2 or even 3 years or up to 5 years, but then the policy and political system change and the new people in, then we may run into that risk. But if we align our research projects with the government's agenda and then development agendas, and then we can avoid it. And that is, one of course, it is already in the rationales forest in when we design any research projects. Then I think those are the 3 points that I want to highlight today, just because of time. If we have more time, that I think that I have more to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, but this is not over. We are saving some time for the questions. In relation to what you just shared, especially the last point on the alignment with the global agenda, I think this kind of this point can be connected to the earlier point made by Sajid about how there needs to be different levels that we see and understand policy process and different policies. And he had mentioned federal level, provincial level, and local level, and perhaps the international/transnational level could be the fourth level that we can consider in the policy process. Once again, thank you so much for sharing your reflections. And now I would like to open the floor for the questions from the audience. And once again, invite Marina to magically condense all these amazing questions into one wonderfully phrased question. Please, Marina.
Thank you, Chamong. I'm not sure I'll be able to do justice to all the great questions in the chat, but let me maybe highlight one common thread that was coming across, which is how the political agendas are influencing the definition of the research agendas in the country. So we have questions addressing the role of policymakers in setting these research agendas, and how is this limiting research, and how is also the reverse flow happening of researchers also influencing the political agenda in terms of the policy priorities that are coming across from the research findings.
Thank you, Marina. If it's okay, I would like to propose that actually Lee starts let's start with Lee's answer, because you had mentioned that some of the projects need to be approved by the government, right? So I think how the agenda of the research could be shaped by the government is quite relevant for your case. So if you don't mind going first, I know it's a big
Yeah, thank you, Chana. I'm just thinking about the 2 directions of the question. But I think that I would like to start with how the research findings can help to shape the policy agenda first. Because in Vietnam, so recently the Vietnamese Communist Party has recently stated that we are on the progress of making English as a second official language at school. And we are together with the World Bank, at Micro, it is an edtech company, and also a research institute under the Ministry of Education and Training, to develop a project in which that we are trying to investigate on how the AI tool software can help to provide equality, equality and quality education. And in this case, it's English learning to students across Vietnam. So we want to see, how it can provide the equality and quality of English teaching to students. And in that way, if we can show that our research findings are positive, and it is likely, highly likely that the government in Vietnam will scale off the implementation of AI tools within the curriculum. And then, that is a part of where the World Bank can jump in as well, because they can provide financial support to the Vietnamese government to do it. And that is one of our ambition at the moment. We just submitted it, but hopefully that we can make it. And on the other ways and how policymakers shape the research agenda, I think I have 2 points to make. So firstly, we must think of, whenever we think of a research proposal, then of course, we know the context of Vietnam. We know what are critical at the moment and what is on the way to be supported by the government. Then we need to focus on that. in the combination with the requirements of the research funders also. But on the another different point is that we know something will sound sensitive to the government, like about the psychology of students, for example, and also the disabilities, students with disabilities, then we need to be careful in the way we frame our research, in the way we mention them within our research, in order to get it approved from the stakeholders that are relevant to our research, and also the people at the grassroots levels who help us to implement and to collect data at the schools, for example. So it's just those are the points that I want to mention. Given the
Thank you
context
so
of.
much.
Thank you.
Yes. Are there any thoughts from other panelists?
Regarding this, I'm Sung Jae-bak. Regarding this point, I wanted to add some other point in South Korea. Recently in Korea, we have some tradition period of governmental leadership. So nowadays, there are so many dispute or argue about the education policies. Regarding the AI, artificial intelligence education, we have some peculiar experience. Last year, or from 2023, we introduced AI digital textbooks. However, the trend is not so different. However, the new people, new government leadership wanted to more upgrade the quality of AI digital textbooks. So for implementing this new agenda, AI drivers, we have another limitations. We have a so strong labor union and teachers unions. So policy of government policies and labor unions agenda, the two different agendas. So between these two agendas, the education sectors decided which direction of our education policy is decided upon which side is more strong or more predominance among peoples. So this is our limitation in policy and politics for educations. And also, we have three sectors regarding these policies. The first is behavioralism. This is some traditional learning and teaching methodologies. So we support, or so many teachers or parents support this behavioralism. However, recently, cognitive science sectors, there are so many cognitive science trials in education sectors. So with human with artificial intelligence, or human with AI digital textbook, or human with human with AI-based courseware. So this all our agenda nowadays is a cognitive science-based approach. The third is the social and cultural interactions. So these three perspectives are nowadays in Korea competing each other. So some scholars support behavioralism, some scholars more support cognitive science aspect. The others support the social or cultural interaction between teachers and students. So all of these political agenda and policy agendas. So we mix each other's in one policy in government and one bill in national assemblies. So this is some competing interest and competing position. So education sector, it is not so easy, very difficult sector to deal with every policies regarding educations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for pointing out many different aspects of a policy. Saeed and Sajid, do you have any thoughts to add? Yes,
two quick
go ahead.
notes. One, from a positive side of it, sometimes we do see policymakers, they have their own political rhetoric that they want to, they will come up with an own agenda. For instance, even in Bangladesh, there was like, okay, now we'll have a digital Bangladesh. Then they will move that, okay, now we'll have a smart Bangladesh. And now, with the change of the regime, we are trying to have a anti-discrimination, inclusive Bangladesh. We have used the same evidence to show that all that you say is actually aligned. So if you can, so when you talk about an inclusive education, when you talk about, the dropout of, of the, girls students, we could say that, okay, you know what, you cannot have a smart Bangladesh without 50% of the of the population is women who are not, if they cannot go to school properly, or at the same time that also fits within the anti-discrimination movement as well. So that's one side of it, that sometimes you can align it. But I think the more difficult side of it is when different stakeholders come up with always what's in it for me approach, and some of the policy issues are can become very non-negotiable for them. For instance, in Bangladesh, we've seen curriculum reform. So the new government, they have made many commissions, but they couldn't make a education reform commission. They did a curriculum reform committee, but they had to disband it because the political parties were not also, always aligned. They have different, everyone wants education to train their own supporters. Like, okay, so put this in the curriculum. And we also see that in the West, that put this in the curriculum so that they become our supporter. So whether you go for recreationism or evolution is the same debate we also are having here. So those are the difficult ones that even when you take the evidence, what needs to be done, it's difficult to find alignment there.
Indeed. I mean, as all panelists have pointed out, education is such a contested area if you consider all these different approaches, all these different interests, and all these different stakeholders involved. Sajid, do you like to share a quick, brief last thoughts on this matter?
I think I use the analogy Trevor Gale, who was one of my teachers back in Melbourne. He used to talk about policy settlements. And I think that's a good analogy for us. We have to also acknowledge our own limitations as researchers. Just as we are critical of the policymakers, we also have to be self-critical. There are always limitations of the research. If there is an ideal world, we can do everything ideally, because it is not. The politicians have to settle on something which is not ideal. Researchers also have to settle on something. So I think it's the ones who are talking about the brokerage. Yes, you lose something, you gain something. It's not an ideal world. So you try and achieve those settlements. And I think if you work long enough, you have more opportunity to say more critical things in a trusted space. Just like in a long-term relationship, you can say critical things politely on a slow pace rather than just venting on everything at the first space. And I think so. It's a settlement. It's not ideal, and we have to continue our work.
Thank you so much once again for all the panelists for your reflections and comments. So now I would like to close the second panel for this amazing conversations, and would like to invite GC for his closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can try.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, so I think we do have some problem here. So anyhow, I don't.
Let's meet from there and this way. Can you unmute the UNESCO headquarters one, please?
Sorry to come in, Sebla. UNESCO headquarters is on mute. Is there any other?
No. Okay. Can you hear us now?
We can hear you well, yes.
I will open the camera. I'm sorry for this technical.
Yeah, so I think I had another round of very thoughtful, rich discussion today, and I wanted to share. I don't know if I should get this. I don't know what's happening now.
This is one.
So yeah, so my closing is about sharing the context within which we are having this this meeting. I don't know if we are going to show the PowerPoint.
Can you please allow me to share my screen?
Just a second. I think it's been set up.
Yeah, so there is some problem of coordination between Geneva and Paris. So
Is it working now?
No.
No, it's still, I'm not allowed to.
No, basically, I think what we can do, since we don't have much time left, I would like to say that I'm really amazed by the rich experience that you have shared today. And this is part of the series of webinars that UNESCO is organizing. And part of the series of webinars that UNESCO is organizing under the broad high-level steering committee, which is established by UNESCO. Next, please go next. That UNESCO established on behalf of the international community. So there is what we call the SDG 4 High-Level Steering Committee, which is comprised of 28 members representing both governments and also other stakeholders, including regional organizations, multilateral organizations, and all these organizations or constituents that you can see on the left side of the slide, which established also three kind of functional areas around the burning kind of thematic priorities. One is promoting evidence-based policy formulation and implementation, which is guided us to organize this series of learning sessions, including the one that we just had. Second is monitoring progress and improve the availability of the evidence, which is led by UNESCO Institute for Statistics and also UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Team. And then the third functional area is about financing, which is led by the World Bank and the Global Partnership for Education. So going forward, so we have this functional area which is focusing on evidence and policy, and which we discussed about how we can strengthen collaboration between knowledge producers and users, especially in the pursuit of strengthening the capacities of education ministries to use data and evidence for policy making and the implementation. So these are, you can see on the slide, some specific objectives, and I'm not going through all this, and because I understand that this presentation is going to be shared with you, so you can take a closer look at what is it about, what are the specific objectives, including when you go to the next slide, the composition of the technical committee. So this technical committee on FA1 is led by UNESCO and the OECD. We do have some Sherpas like Latvia and Jacobs Foundation, and you can see all these acronyms of different committee members, including also global network. We have NORAC, with which we are working very closely. So then let's go to the next slide. We actually work on the basis of biannual planning. What you can see there is the current work plan of last year and this year, and you can see different priority programs that we established. And the number 3 is about learning series on using evidence to inform policies and practice. And I'd like to present some more about this, this program in the next slide. So it's about using evidence to transform education policy. You can see what you on the slide, the left side diagram, which is actually borrowed from Kita Steiner-Hamsi, which is about the interaction between production and use of research, and also how the global supply of initiatives, networks could also support country-specific priorities and support the use of research evidence for implementing and informing education policies at country level. So next is more about what we organized last year, a series of learning sessions around the policy cycle, as you experts and government officials have discussed. So we have been focusing on each of the steps of the policy cycle, like policy analysis and policy making, and also policy implementation and monitoring, and also evaluation. As you can see, different sessions that we organized over the past year. And this year, next slide, and we have been focusing more on the knowledge brokering in education, and you can see the definition of what we mean by knowledge brokering, and you had all the specialists. So as part of this, we organized so far, in the next slide, the first session of this year, which is very much focusing on the science of learning, and in collaboration with the UNESCO Global Alliance on the Science of Learning for Education, that we organize showcasing and highlighting some experience from different countries like Canada, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Africa, and France, and focusing on how science of learning can be leveraged to improve policy and the practice, and what is the interplay of knowledge brokering in this context. In the next slide, session 6, this is the learning session that we organized in collaboration with the UNESCO regional office in Bangkok, which is also serving as the regional coordinator for the global education cooperation mechanism, showcasing examples from countries like Laos PDR and Malaysia, and also Sri Lanka. So you can see all the concrete examples of what we discussed as the footnote of this slide, so I'm not going to go into this. Given the time left. And the next slide is what is upcoming. So we are aiming to have another session before the end of this year in collaboration with UNICEF around the Foundational Learning Action Tracker, how to transfer commitment into action, which is following the learning session, this important session that was coordinated by NORAC today. And then also we are aiming to organize early next year to discuss about education transformation, especially sharing tools that are being developed by UNESCO and other partners to support countries in the trajectory of system transformation for effective education reimagination. So next is a little bit more about science of learning and the global alliance that UNESCO established to bring together all the scientists, researchers, policymakers, practitioners, development partners, technology providers, producers, even the media, in order to discuss about the common agenda of how education systems can improve their policies and practices based on the evidence and based on what the science is telling us. So you do see much of these details onto the slide. So in the next slide, so basically, we bring together not only different constitutions, but also the experts from different scientific disciplines that all come together to constitute the science of learning. So UNESCO is organizing in collaboration with partners a couple of months later, 11th and 12th December in Paris, the second annual meeting of the Global Alliance of the Science of Learning. So I'd like to invite you all to consider participating in this. So should you have any questions, please let us know so that we can facilitate your participation in that global gathering on the science of learning that brings together not only experts, but also practitioners and policymakers to discuss the common agenda, which is about improved evidence for education policy and learning. So next is some further information. So if you want to have some what we discussed as part of this FA1 learning series, you can find all the information about the series, the meetings that we organized, and also the Global Alliance on the Science, how to participate, what it is about, how we can contribute to this discussion. And you can simply click there and you can find all this information. Once again, I'd like to thank you all very much, and especially Nora for helping us to coordinate and organize this very important learning session. And at UNESCO, we'll continue to facilitate this in partnership with key partners like UNICEF, GP, and others. Okay, thank you. Should I turn over now to whom the floor? Okay, Chan Wong.
Thank you.
Gita, you close.
Thank you very much for those closing remarks. Just to thank all the participants for your engagement in the session, and of course to our wonderful speakers today in this session. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in upcoming KIX EMAP webinars and the upcoming events also of the FA1 learning series. Thanks, everyone.